Jess, you're part of Occupy London, are you?
Yes, I am.
Right on. And we're right now down at the lockout of the EMD here in London. And Occupy's joined the CHRW and the other unions in Solidarity. And apparently some of us stayed the night last night, and I hear you did.
Yeah, I did. It was cool because we had the tent set up, and then I took a nap and I woke up and there was a wood stove there. And then there was like a table with like all kinds of soups and cookies. It was
Nice.
It was nice. Like you could hear it, like the tent going back and forth inside, but like inside there is actually really nice.
So I heard it was like minus 25 wind chill last night.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
How was the sleep?
Not bad actually.
Yeah?
It was okay.
So you got a tent inside the tent?
Yes, we actually have 2 tents inside the tent.
2 tents inside the tent.
Yeah.
Nice. And you stayed nice and warm though.
Yeah.
Is he here?
Yeah.
Good. Oh, 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 oh!
So what brings you to London, Sid? Why is it so important to come and support this specific cause?
Well, I wanted to come down and speak to Tim Carey, the president of CHRW Local 27, to offer the support of the Ontario Federation of Labour. We see this as a key labour dispute, not just here in Ontario, but all across Canada. This is happening all too frequently now, where foreign corporations come into Canada, take over key industries, and then try and move the technology or move the equipment, or else slash workers' wages. It happens to be the MO that's been taking place now with Valley Inco up in Sudbury, for example, with the Steelworkers Union. US Steel down in Hamilton, they were out on strike for a lockdown for almost a year. The same agenda is at play. It's basically lowering people's wages, destroying the middle class, taking away decent pension plans, and taking away benefits. That's been the agenda that we've been facing with now for the last number of years, I guess, in Canada. And here we are in London, essentially saying enough is enough. We're taking a stand. This is a profitable corporation. There's absolutely no need to be coming to workers and asking them to take a 50% reduction in their wages. It's an absolute crime that they could even get away with asking for this. Now, what does it do, of course, to the economy? Well, you know, small business people in this city ought to be concerned. These are really good paying jobs. These folks go out and they buy cars, they buy furniture, they buy homes, they keep the economy going basically. And if we keep on destroying the middle class and taking jobs that are paying $35 an hour and reducing them down to 16 and change, they will not be able to even afford to put their own kids into university, for example. The next generation are probably the only generation that will be faced with a real concern that they will earn less, have less quality of life, less standard of living than what their parents did. So in many ways this fight is about the next generation as well. And that's what we're fighting for, and that's why you know, the Occupy movements are so strong, and I'm so delighted actually to see them here, because we know full well that the Labour movement and the Occupy movement have got to come together and start to highlight in a national, or at least in the Toronto newspaper today, the banner headline shows that CEOs made 189 times more than the average worker in this country. That's the kind of corporate greed that we're now fighting. This is the kind of greed that's run amok and completely out of control, and we have to try and stop that and change the dynamic, change the paradigm, if you will, where workers, when a foreign company comes in to take over a key industry in Canada, the Act basically talks about a net benefit to Canadians. That has got to mean a net benefit as well to workers. It cannot just be about the corporation. It's got to be a net benefit where workers can have a decent standard of living, decent wage, some degree of job security. The wages and the benefit package that's in place in the collective agreement, there should be guarantees that they'll be maintained. It's not right to come in and buy the industry up and then essentially slash the wages, attack the workers, force them out onto a picket line, and then try and move the equipment or whatever the game plan is down into the United States. That's not what free trade was meant to be about, and at some point in time, a government has to step up and say, we're going to protect Canadian workers. So that's what the Labour movement is about, basically taking on this fight, taking on those issues, because we see them as absolutely germane to the survival of the labour movement in Canada.
You talk about the individual communities and individual problems in individual communities, but there has been a need, I think, for a galvanizing effort to face this down, and you haven't seen that yet. You haven't seen that kind of...
We've seen it in Europe. Obviously, you see it in Greece, and you see it in places like Ireland, where I've come from. We've yet to see it in Canada, but I think this will be the catalyst that will galvanise the labour movement and bring together the Occupy movement and other people who are concerned out there. There's a lot of folks in the communities, our partners that we've been partnering with for many, many years, Council of Canadians and environmentalists, and all very much concerned about what's taking place in Canada, what's happening to our economy. And we're being fed, a load of hooey by the federal government saying that somehow Canada is surviving this recession. You ask workers, are they surviving this recession? You ask these workers how they feel about having their wages cut by 50%. And some people saying that you should be happy to have a job at all. We cannot have that race to the bottom. We have to stop the race to the bottom. It's got to be about the highest common denominator, not the lowest common denominator. And that's what we're facing right now.
It seems like if you're on that merry-go-round and it's already moving, how do we step out of that race to the bottom?
I think a lot of it has to do with, again, here's a lockout that I think will capture the imagination of the labour movement. But keeping in mind, you got Rob Ford, who's got a vicious agenda in Toronto, and he's wanting to take on 30,000 workers in the city of Toronto and do the same thing, basically. Lower their wages, lay them off. So we're hoping that this particular lockout will galvanise that kind of support. Even take a look into Quebec right now. You've got Rio Tinto, steel workers again locked out, 800 workers kicked to the side of the street. At some point, all of these strikes and all of these labour disputes and all these lockouts begins to click in the minds of workers. And once that happens, then you've got yourself a movement. And once you get the movement going, then I think we're able to stare down the corporations. When we get the ammunition like we got in today's paper in the Toronto Star, where CEOs are earning 189 times more than the average worker. And in 1995, it was 85 times more than the average worker. So here we are. The information is now beginning to come out. The Occupy movement did a brilliant job. People ask, it was too diverse and it was too diffused and we didn't really understand what they were fighting for. They did an absolutely brilliant job of capturing the imagination of people in the sense of the 1% versus the 99%. People now get that. They now begin to understand it, and now they're looking at corporate greed, and we're seeing it here. This is the poster child for corporate greed in many respects, right here in this community. And we're going to drive this. We're going to make sure that this particular lockout becomes the poster child, if you will, for corporate greed. And every time now that a corporation or a CEO stands up and tries to take wages off workers, we'll be there reminding the public, reminding people by joining our movements together to show that there is some fight back left in the labour movement in Canada, and there's some fight back left with ordinary Canadians who are saying we are not going to stand by and let our standard of living just be eroded and taken away from us, and particularly taken away from the next generation of kids. I mean, think about kids going into university right now, coming out with a mountain of debt, and graduating into what? What kind of jobs? These jobs are paying $15 an hour. It's just not right. Going to university for 4 or 5 or 6 years to get a job at the end of the day paying $15 an hour is just not on. And that's what this fight also is about. It's about the kind of an economy and the kind of society that we want to live in this country. So if you want to come to Canada, we've got great natural resources. If you want to, put value added in and start developing equipment and the resources and refining our oils and wherever the case may be, you want to do it in Canada, then pay us a decent wage and allow us to participate in the economy, and allow us to participate in the natural resources that are taken out of the ground here. Let's make absolutely certain that ourselves and the Aboriginal community in particular, we raise those folks out of poverty as well, because that's another issue that's beginning to come to the forefront, where Canadians are now beginning to see the injustice of the way that the Aboriginal community in this country is being treated. So there's a lot of issues at play, and I just think that I'm so glad to be down here to be able to say to Tim and the CHRW, thank you for taking on this fight, and we're going to join hands with the labour movement here in London, and hopefully we can bring this to a successful conclusion.
And Sid, a lot of labour experts are watching this closely, saying it could mark the end of the clout the CAW. What do you have to say?
Well, you don't know the CAW, because the CAW have yet to begin to fight. Like seriously, this is, you know, there was legislation was brought in to force the flight attendants and the other workers that the CAW represented for Air Canada. So they never really got a chance to put on the fight because they bring in legislation. But in this particular case, they don't have that weapon. They're not able to bring in legislation to put these workers back to work. And in any event, they're being locked out, so legislation wouldn't do it. And it's not a federal issue. A lot of it's got to do with provincial issue. For example, there is a threat in this particular dispute that they may try and bring in scabs. So we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on the McGuinty government to say it's about time that we gave workers some protections. Let's bring some balance back to the labour relations in this country again, in this province. So in other words, give us anti-scab legislation. So as we have a fighting chance when we're kicked out to the side of the street by an employer. You can't just come in and continue to make profits. So we'd like to see anti-scab legislation as well.
So is this a crucial battle for the CAW, would you say?
It's not only for the CAW, for the entire labour movement. There's no question about it. It's a line in the sand that's been drawn here, and it remains to be seen, of course, how it'll all play out. But there's no question. I mean, the issues around foreign investment will come into play. The issues around anti-scab legislation will come into play. The whole question about what kind of society do we want will come into play. Wages and benefits and pension plans will come into play. So it's all on the table here. It's a very interesting dispute in some ways, but I'm just glad, by the way, that it's the CAW that's on the front lines here, because they've proved themselves in the past. They're a militant union, they're a strong union. You've got great leadership, both locally and at the national level. There's no doubt in my mind. If anybody doubts the intestinal fortitude of the CAW, we stand back and just watch them.
Sid, in this case, there's been a threat, then, or at least the implied threat has been, hey, we're going to take the work to the United States, we're going to take it to Indiana. Are you concerned that it's the United States that's sort of seen as the country that we can take it to for the cheaper labor? Is that, you know, usually it's been China and Mexico, but now that it's the United States, is that a bigger problem?
Well, what concerns me about that is you've got these right-to-work states where basically you don't really have any trade union movement, and workers don't really have any rights whatsoever. And there's a lot of politicians, and Tories in particular in this country, who are looking and licking their chops at those kinds of right-to-work states down in the US. So yeah, it is a concern that if they get away with doing that here, a lot of other corporations will be watching and say, hey, that's great. If it's good for us, if it's good for that corporation, it's good enough for us. So let's bring more jobs down to those right-to-work states. Or in some cases, you'll start to see some pressure up here to say, well, maybe if we got rid of unions, maybe if we got rid of labour legislation, maybe if we got rid and bring in right-to-work legislation, maybe we can keep some of the jobs up here. And that's a danger, of course, because then that is the race to the bottom, because that now becomes a free-for-all. Benefits and pension plans, forget about them, they'll be a thing of the past. So, yeah, it's a concern about the ideology behind this particular dispute is worrisome.
Yeah, as I was saying before, we've had numerous people over the last week or so tell us they finally get what we were doing in the park. Because now they can see a manifestation of that happening right in front of them, and a blatant one. You know, this case is just so obscene, where a company that's making record profits is attacking workers so they can make more profits. You know, and putting people in these positions that have been helping to support the community all this time. I mean, yeah, we're finding regular people are relating to where we're coming from more and more all the time, and that is what it's all about. You know, why should there be a small group of people who profit in obscene ways endlessly while the rest of us struggle and tread water and have to worry about our future constantly?
Perfect. Thanks. I appreciate you taking the time.
Cool.